Welcome everyone to the second debate on the fourth industrial revolution that we're hosting here at the University of Johannesburg. For those of you who tuned in last time when we were discussing ideas around the workspace and what's happening in terms of technological changes and will we still be in our jobs in the near future, will know the setup by now. Tonight we're going to discuss children and the fourth industrial revolution and ideas around both how we enable technology use in our schools, for example, and encourage children to learn and have better educational spaces through technology. But also how do we protect ourselves online and how do we protect our children online and how do we protect data and our privacy online, for example. My name is Ylva Rodney-Gomede and I'm a professor of journalism here at the University of Johannesburg, and I will be the moderator of the panel tonight. And I'm very, very, very happy to introduce the panel to you. And right next to me I have Professor Elisabeth Henning, who is a colleague of mine here at UJ, and she is currently the Saatchi Chair in Integrated Studies of Learning, Language, Science and Mathematics in Primary Schools. A very warm welcome to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Welcome. And next to Elizabeth, we have Dr. Graham Codrington, who describes himself very interesting as a futurist of technology trends. And he is also the founder of an organization called smartparent.com, and we're going to talk more about that in just a few seconds. And next to Graham, we have Charlene Evans. Charlene is an accountant by profession, but she got into teaching to spend more time with her children. And she's currently teaching at the Steve Jobs School in Reimsisch here in Johannesburg. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well, so welcome to you as well. And right next to Charlene, we have Lucien Pierce, who is a technology lawyer who specializes in information security and the protection of personal information and data. Very warm welcome to you. We're going to talk more about that as well. Lovely to have you with us. And last but absolutely not least, at the very end of the table, I hope you can see him, is Mpho Segolela. Welcome to you, Mpho. Mpho works for an organization that is called Code for Change. And they lobby for the implementation, rollout, and uptake of technology in secondary schools in South Africa. And we're going to talk more about that as well. So warm welcome to you, Mpho. It's lovely to have you all here. And I happen to know that we are all parents to children of different ages. More than one. Teenagers and some to younger children, and Professor Henning even have grandchildren. So I think that the discussion will be interesting. We probably have a lot of our own personal takes on this as well and examples that we can give as well. But I want to start off our conversation tonight, and I want to turn to you, Graham. The organization, Future Smart Parent. Being a smart parent in the future sounds really good. What does it mean?
At my organization Tomorrow Today, every single time we did consulting work with big corporate companies who wanted to look at future trends and disruptive change. When we got to the Q&A time, people would put up their hand and the first question was, but what about my children?
Yeah.
What should they be learning? Is the education adequate? Is the technology damaging or helping them? What should I do as a parent? And so a little while ago we launched this website, futuresmartparent.com, and our goal is really just to help parents, to give parents resources, to help them to just be a little bit more confident right from the early age but all the way through teenagers into the university or young adulthood, to just say what's the future going to be like and how should we as parents be parenting. We don't have experience either as parents or grandparents in this digital age. We didn't grow up in the digital age, so we have no memory ourselves, and we're all working this out as we go along. And so it's everything from just giving people a little bit of motivation and as well as practical assistance, right the way down to helping people to think through some big issues. How to choose a school, for example. I think coding should be compulsory, for example, and done from an early age. And so, it's saying to parents, here's some questions to take if you're thinking of a school or going to school, right the way down to what does screen time mean in your house. So that's really what we're trying to do. I'm excited to hear from the panel because the types of expertise we have here this evening are exactly the types of resources we're hoping to provide to parents.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Graham. And I actually was thinking about this, and I think that, we also know the unevenness of rollout of technology in our schools. It's very highly dependent on whether you're in a private school or in a public school, for example. I don't know, Paul, I know you work with secondary schools in South Africa.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing. Do you see the gaps in technology rollouts, for example?
Yes. So my organization, the reason we do the work that we do is that in the 9 years of our existence, we interacted a lot with government, corporate sector in terms of upskilling our youth in digital skills. And we narrowed our focus to secondary schools mainly because we realized that we're somewhat in a business unusual environment when it comes to the progression, or rather the uptake of computer science within our basic education sector. And Code for Change is advocating mainly coding as the platform of choice, because we believe that it is necessary for the young ones to understand the back end of the solutions that we're using. And if you look at Africa as a continent, we are more consumers of technology as opposed to innovators or developers of such technologies. And we felt that we needed to position the continent to be in the forefront as well of developing these solutions. And there are a number of things that make it a bit difficult to get to where we need to be at the pace that we need to be going at. And socio-economic issues, I come from, or was brought up from a township kind of environment, and as much as I was interested in technology, access to it was very limited. And as an organization, we're trying to streamline efforts from government, corporate, and the public sector to say, how do we come together to improve the conditions in our schools using technology, obviously, as a vehicle.
Great, thank you, Paul. And I mean, we're talking secondary schools there, and I want to also, maybe also talk a little bit about, younger audiences or younger school children as well. And I know that, Charlene, you teach primary school children. Yes. I have someone commenting now, because we have the audience online, of course, following what we do and what we're saying, what we're talking about. And Chris is saying, in South Africa, actually, coding should be almost like the fourth or third language and compulsory for all school children.
Okay, so if I may...
Steve Jobs School.
Yes, we offer that from grade R at our schools. We go all the way from grade R up until grade 7. So that is an everyday or a daily activity at our schools. We also have things where we're allowing children to get out daily, more outdoors. So we have that as part of their curriculum day, that they have PE every single day so that they can get out, because most of them will only ever get out at school, when you force them at recess or at lunch breaks, etc. So we're doing that. We also have Lego, which is something that children, it's an innovative space, a maker space where children can go in and actually just have a little bit of their time. They can develop. Sometimes they have actual lessons for children who just don't know how to create. They have a bit of guidance with regards to that. So we're actually trying to do a lot of things that we see a need for from, grassroots level for children, using technology in a very responsible manner rather than just YouTubing videos and, watching everyone gaming, etc. So that's what we're trying to encourage. And I think if we can encourage children to use technology more wisely, and some adults as well, we'll, you know, step away from the addiction and all of the negatives that come with technology use. And I'm sure all of us know adults as well who have fallen prey to, you know, being on the internet as a bit of an obsession. So we want to try and educate our children. That's what we do. So we even have, you know, education, life skills lessons around internet security. How do children protect their personal space, you know, their online, what are their friends or family members able to see and look at, you know, how protected are they. And I did, you know, a little thing with my kids where I showed them profiles of people and videos where it could be a 40-year-old man and he pretends to be an 11-year-old child. Then, you know, sort of soliciting them to meet them at the malls and all the places that our children go to. So for our children to be aware that they put themselves in danger through their own behavior, you know, you can pretty much be tracked if you check in at places, etc., children to be aware of that.
I think that's really interesting what you're saying, Charlene. And I'm picking up on two things here that I think we can come back to as well. And the first thing is then the broader view of technology to bring in creativity and actually expand it to beyond what we often think about as, you know, being, you know, technology platforms or devices, for example, to thinking about it in a creative space. And we know that when we talk in the fourth industrial revolution in particular, we need to also think about it in terms of creative spaces, collaborative spaces, and communicative spaces, which I think is hugely important as well. So that's interesting that you're trying to create that. I'm going to turn to you, Lucienne, here, because the second thing that we picked up on here, I take from Charlene's, what Charlene said, was data protection. Young children data protection. So these are the pitfalls in this space, of course. What are your thoughts as a lawyer and an expert in these fields?
Well, absolutely. You know, I have an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old who are really immersed in technology with tablets and games and that sort of thing. And what we've been doing is making use of technology. So one of the ways that we've been trying to get them to exercise more as opposed to staying indoors is we've bought them some tracking devices or fitness devices. And what I did was, like a good lawyer, I went and read the terms and conditions governing the use of those particular devices. And you'll be shocked at what you are giving away about your children. They essentially are not children anymore. They are sources of revenue for these companies who make use of this data. So if you read the terms and conditions, you basically say that every single bit of information will be utilized by this particular company for its own purposes. You know, so kids sometimes, I was at my daughter's school this morning, and two of the girls had some GPS type watches. And if you think about that, in the wrong hands, what damage that could do. So for me, privacy and information security and the aspects that you need to consider are paramount before you immerse your children in the technology that they all seem to be using these days.
And I think that's you know, and this is hugely important. And as I said at the beginning, we're all parents here, and of course we are. I mean, we know how you know, the lack of a better word, how gullible we are as adults in the online space. We actually sign up and we hand over our personal data, and we know for Facebook scandals, we know from the Cambridge Analytica scandals more recently that we very willingly do so, and we're quite bad at protecting ourselves. But I think, you know, as Charlene, you also pointed out, we even worse at actually protecting our children in an online environment. And of course, there we have a huge duty as parents to do so. It's our mandate and duty to do so. One thing that I'd like to maybe query, since we're talking children, and I'm going to turn to you, Elizabeth, this idea of childhood, and we're talking primary school children, we're talking young adults, and so on. There are delineations as well in an educational space, I guess, in terms of how we look at what is childhood and what we do in an educational space vis-a-vis what we do at home, for example, in terms of privacy. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, I have quite a lot of thoughts on that. But let me say I speak from, if I may use the contemporary metaphor, from two platforms. The one is a grandmother of 2 young girls who have access to all the tech they want and who are quite but to make sure that she has a personal because we're talking about the privileged people in the world. I'm not going to talk about I think that's pretty obvious. Social justice agenda, and we try to blend they don't have gender, have love. Robots don't have real parents, but or which play do better at learning than robots who don't have that in mind. And then I want to say quite seriously, we have a lot of dreams and ideals about the magic of working via this technology. Already 20 years ago, it was shown that it doesn't really change your cognition. In fact, it can inhibit your cognition because of the working memory of the individual. So you have to attend to so many things at once, process them, the language, the other symbols, the pictures, the emotions, and everything else, that the working memory actually comes to a standstill. And then to process that, especially if language is involved, it goes to a conceptual level, a linguistic conceptual level, which makes it very bothers me to make choices. And I think we know that. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. So what I would like to emphasize is the protection against the fourth industrial revolution is going to cognition. About 100,000 years. We that ran across the East African savannah. So I ask, how much relationship does a parent, a teacher, a community member bring at the touch level, at a feel level, to make as people in childhood? Officially childhood is from birth to 12. Animal without parents and without a society into, we know the stories about people who grow up in the woods. So is the fourth industrial revolution a forest, a dark forest in which our children can get lost because they don't have love, space, touch? Or is it a place, and I'm talking only of kids up to 12, because I think at 12 you're pretty sure of your identity, and you know boundaries, you know sexual boundaries, and you know other boundaries. We hope you do. But I think what gets lost in this hype and this enthusiasm of dreaming of the future is that our children do not have models of emotion and models of cognitive control. Their executive functions as young people can go missing. That's what bothers me. And then I'm very worried about 80% of our children who are in schools with teachers who have no tech savvy and who struggle and who just have to get through a curriculum. But that's for another day.
Well, thank you for that, Elizabeth. Because I mean, this is the work with, and these are certain and actually not encouraging. That's the wrong word, but of cognitive processes, and this is what Elizabeth pointed out. A little bit more in terms of what you do.
I think what we ultimately trying to find is, you know, where parents actually parent more, and I think that's where the responsibility needs to ultimately lie. You know, I often say to the parents of children that I teach, I may be your child's educator for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but you're ultimately going to be that parent for however long it takes for them to become independent. So you have more of a responsibility in your actions than I do in my classroom. And so there's a lot of things, a lot of skills I'm finding that children lack at certain ages because of, you know, parents not exposing them to it, children not having as you say, love. They come to me for that. You know, I'm the person they want to tell all their stories to. I don't have enough time to listen to all of that as well as teach. And that's purely from children who are not given time and attention at home. And when I, you know, have a chance to talk to a child one-on-one, and I say, oh, but hasn't your mom told you about stories about how they grew up? And these children will say, no, they haven't. And all I do is tell my kids about how things were when I was growing up and how we used to do things differently and how I walk to school, not that they can anymore because we live in a different time, just from terms of security and all of that. But, you know, we lived a little bit more freely, we played much more, you know, we didn't need technology to develop as people, we had friends. And so often I have my own children saying, you know, but I'm not on social media. I'm like, how about this idea? Try be social with your friends at school, you know, rather than try to come home and then reconnect with them. What did you say to your friends at school? Oh, no, we didn't really speak. Well, try that. So I've taken away my children's electronic devices for social media. I have a 15-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son, and you know, because they don't have that, they come home with stories about their friends and they're actually involved and they're talking to each other, because there isn't that what are you doing and what did you eat last night happening while they're eating and while they're actually living the moment. So they have much more to talk to their friends about, and then obviously I come home and tell them about my day and how I did things, and so we try and find that balance, which is very, very difficult because I'm also busy sometimes and I hear my kids speaking and I honestly don't know what they're saying, and so oftentimes I have to say to them, can you just let me finish this and then I will talk to you. So, you know, to have that time, I think that's what's important for parents. We all rush around trying to create better, as we believe, for our children by giving them more stuff. And I think that's not what we need to do. We need to teach them more stuff that we didn't learn, not give them more stuff that we didn't have. That's
and one hears, you know, this is being debated, I think, quite frequently. So I have two questions, and I think one goes to the school environment and maybe secondary school environment, because Charlene talks about the primary school environment, and the other one goes to us as parents, what we can do. And I mean, I see, and I've observed this at home. So I have 3 teenage boys, and they're at the private boys' school, which, you know, good access to technology, and as parents we've been able to provide the technology as well for the children. I would say that my 2 oldest sons, who are now in senior high school, what I see them using the technology for more and more is actually schoolwork, and I can say that they do it, and I find that quite encouraging. I would say that my younger son maybe still have, but you know, there's an element of it, of maybe growing into something, and something that's being inculcated in a school environment. And Paul, I don't know, how would you say, how do we do that? How can we encourage it to be actually an educational tool?
Yes, and it's quite interesting. I mean, if you look at, for example, as an organization, our approach is that it's not meant solely for the learners. So the learning platform that we've developed, we have considered a lot of elements, especially in terms of the African context. One, you have language barriers. So a kid from Garankuwa in north of Pretoria compared to a kid who is not a lot of kilometers away, let's say 20 kilometers away, at a more privileged school, would have different understanding of how to apply code. And it's quite interesting when you look at it. And as an organization, we always are encouraging that all stakeholders participate in the teaching of our kids on how to use the technology, how to develop the technology, how to be creative with the technology. So there's parent engagement, there's teacher engagement, there's community engagement, there's the government engagement, and corporate and so forth. I tend to agree with Elizabeth. I mean, I'm a father to 2 very young kids, aged 9 and 3, and as much as, you know, Daddy is all about tech, and I'm always in front of the screen. When I get home, it's an unspoken rule. We detach from the technology. So if she's doing homework and it incorporates technology in it, so be it. But when homework is done, it's home time. And I do a lot of gardening, so they follow me around. I prefer to buy a lot of physical toys, jump rope and so forth. So I believe that we have to be very careful not to lose that human element. So technology has to be somewhat of an enabler to make things easy. But once it infringes on us being humans, privacy and general human behavior, then we need to be very wary. And which is why we teach code from a perspective that you need to understand what you can do with code. It enables you to control the technology. It's not meant to take over your life and become a lifestyle. No.
I think that's the big issue there,
Yes.
is that I think there's an overreaction that's often happening, is that people just, they see technology as on or off. So you've either got it or you don't have it at all.
Yes.
And it's not a 1 or 100 situation. There are gradients of it. And so, for example, you can connect through technology. You can build a relationship through technology. FaceTime, we've got a family WhatsApp group. So during the day, I'm able to interact. My memory of my father is that when he left for work in the morning, if you phoned him at the office, the house had better be burning down.
Yes.
You weren't allowed to interrupt him when he was offered. Well, even if you did have phones, but I mean, he had a phone on his desk, not on his person. And whereas my daughters know that they can WhatsApp me during the day, and I might be in a business meeting, and I've got a little moment where I can go and have an interaction with them. And if we use the technology to do human things, then the technology is great. What's happening is that some people are using the technology to do non-human activities, and we need to limit that a little bit. So simple examples. A lot of people say, I see my children just playing games all the time, and they're not interacting with others. Well, I'm sorry, then you haven't actually watched their games. Their games are interactive. The games that my daughters play, I play games with them from the other side of the world, because today's games are teamwork developing and networking and so on. So I think we need to be very careful of saying, let's just switch off the technology because the technology is the problem. It isn't. The way we use the technology and what we use the technology for, those are the problems.
I would like to come in there because, of course, that's completely true. It's the nicest thing in the world. I have a married daughter who lives in the US, and last night, 2 hours on WhatsApp video. I mean, I see her face, I feel, but when she was a kid, we built this relationship. So I will not have 2 hours speaking to a stranger. So there's already a relationship. In 1994, a book was published by a professor of New York University, Neil Postman. The title was The Disappearance of Childhood, and his issues were with the length of video clips, or the switches of scenes. Excuse me, I'm not very conversant with this language, but the bottom line is that it is not this cognitive apparatus that we think it is. I buy it that it has to be used wisely, but I think we have been a little bit seduced by the magic it can do for our brains. Yes, we can learn to code. Yes, I see my granddaughters doing the most amazing things and making films and doing wonderful things and accessing information like you can't believe. But it's controlled by an adult who cares. And I think that's the line. I don't think there's technology on off. Hey, we're in this revolution, scary as it might be for people like me. I'm the oldest on this panel, right? But it's also a beautiful thing. Let's skip childhood and middle age. Let's go to senior citizen to refresh your brain. You know, you don't have to do games in a magazine, every time you touch the technology, another few of your neurons are saved from Alzheimer's. You know, so I'm completely for it, but I am worried about the seduction.
Can I test something with you?
Yes, do.
Somebody made a suggestion at a recent seminar that I was at. They said the real magic of reading with your children. There's obviously a lot of brain development and everything else, but actually the reason why most of us who had parents who read to us have a wonderful warm memory of that is more the fact that it was the parent taking time out to share the activity. The fact that it happened to be a book you were reading almost is irrelevant.
I quite agree with
so
you.
it could be a puzzle or a game. So why would we not then take an iPad and play a game or engage with watching YouTube videos, but in that same moment, on the bed together.
Exactly.
You watch it for a few minutes, then you switch off and discuss it. You share with each other. Would you agree that that's...
I'm something of a reading specialist.
Okay, yes.
So completely. This thing that because adults read to you, you learn to read. I'm so sorry, I was going to use a rude word, but I won't.
Incorrect.
I grew up, and I think this is hard for people to believe in South Africa. I grew up in a home where there were no books except the Bible. Literally. My parents never read one word to me, but when I hit off to school, so big, also walking bloody far and through a river, and catching the school bus, I learned to read because I knew language, not because my mama and dada read to me. You cannot learn to read if you don't know language. And the beauty, by the way, of tech for young kids is that your vocabulary explodes if it's in English. Mark that.
Or if you're using technology that gives you language as part of what the...
Oh, yeah. No, my little grandchildren are teaching themselves Spanish. Hola, hola every day to me. But I think the point is that it happened so suddenly, and I've said that to our Vice Chancellor at one point. It happened so suddenly, this bloody revolution of yours, that it's hard to come to terms with the fact that it is a revolution and that we're in a different orbit. And I think that is our problem, is the seduction of we're in this new orbit and it's going to work. You have to have language. You have to have language if it's Sesotho, Sepedi. You have to speak it well, but then you have to, whether we like it or not, I'm not English speaking. Not at all. In fact, my great-grandparents and people fought the Anglo-Boer War against the British. So let's just get that straight. But I had to learn this language to master it because it does open up the world to me. At one point, maybe it'll be Mandarin, who knows. But I wanted to say it's the language, and now this is our problem. Our kids go onto the internet in English. Hi, Wena. You can get seduced into that so fast, but because you don't know the nuance of that little sentence which looks so innocent, but you didn't pick up that when you were a kid. You didn't hear your mama and dada talk about this at the table and say, oh, pas op daarvoor, and be careful of this. And I think that so the problem is a bigger one. Can I come and work for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, and of course we battle with this as parents. But let's stay with maybe, we talk about languages, and of course that's hugely important. And of course this online space has become very dominated by English. So that's also something that we need to be wary of and in these spaces. And I'm sure that both Mpo and Charlene, you can talk to that. But maybe come back to that. I just want to pick up on something that Oscar Polido, who is one of our viewers online, says, and I want to turn to you here, Lucienne. He says that, or let's think about it from a perspective of when things go wrong. So yes, we should engage and so on. But Charlene, you also pointed out there are spaces where actually young children are taken in an online space. Well, even adults are taken in sometimes of scams and scammers in an online space. And what can we do, Lucienne? Because what Oscar says is, isn't it the government, intervention that's needed in terms of policies and sort of protect the online, or try to, regulate the online environment?
Well, we've got some really great laws out there, world class. We've got new laws coming in all the time that are intended to deal with this. In fact, we have a law that, cybersecurity law, that is going to focus on online aspects, stalking and all the other nasty things that happen. But we can have the best laws in the world, but it's up to us as parents, is it not, to give the kids the very basic education about privacy, about security, about things that could go wrong. But of course, when they do go wrong, ultimately, I think that we will have sufficient laws and regulations in our country to take down, remove all of those people who might be attacking our children in the cybersphere. So I think we will have sufficient protections, but of course it comes down to you as a parent, training your children, educating them, giving them common sense information on what and what not to do online.
Yeah. So language literacy, but also digital literacy, hey, for us as parents, that in our children. And Paul, let me turn to you first. What could that mean in an online environment for secondary school children across the spectrum?
Yes, and this is where now it turns, could turn ugly very quickly or turn out very good. And I'll put in, again, from Code for Change's position, we are very strong on the policy in terms of tech education or computer science education in our schools. We believe the curriculum is archaic. There's a lot of missing elements to balance it out. And it's one of the pillars that we're working strongly on to engage government to say, you need to revisit the curriculum. It needs to be more holistic. You have Lucian, who just pointed out, the cons of being online and what great laws we have, but that is not incorporated in the learning space. And learners learn code quickly, very quickly. And again, code can either be white or black, and by that I mean it can either be very dark, meaning very nasty things can be done with code, or it can be very positive. And the only way we can battle this out is if we have an active government that engages both civil society, the corporate sector, and people in the areas of developing all these technologies and seeing how best they can work in terms of improving our policies. As much as we would love all of our learners in the secondary schools that we impact in the country to be exposed to code, we also need to have an element of security and an element of access to learning material. And unfortunately, our policies are failing us, as things stand in the country, and there's a lot to be done. So in terms of cyber law, it's again a topic that is very close and dear to me, because I feel that as much as we are digitally empowering these young people, and the level that we work in secondary school, they're about to go into the work environment. So they take those skills and apply them without understanding the repercussions coming with it. So there's still a lot to be done. And our suggestion is we need to have some kind of communication. There's a gap between government, and by government I mean our schooling system, the law, and what is available in terms of technology. So we need some kind of a forum where people, different stakeholders, can feed into what is best for our kids. I'm privileged to expose myself to a lot that has to do with technology. I'm not closing it off to coding only. And for that reason, I'd like to think that I have a bit of information in terms of how do I then deliver it to my kids. And from an organization's perspective as well, how do we then develop better content that is safe and that will engage learners in a more productive manner. Yeah.
Nicholas online as well, he says it doesn't matter what we do, we can't protect our children. Charlene, what would you say? So digital literacy in terms of younger children, what do you do? And one thing that came to me is that we've finally, I'd say, and maybe I'm saying this, shouldn't say this, we've sort of in some of our discourses have moved away when we talk about, for example, sexual grooming and sexual abuse of children from this idea of stranger danger. And I think that children today understand this idea that actually, you know, it's often someone, intimate someone that you know, but it seems to me in an online environment that maybe, you know, stranger danger is an idea, or, you know, idea, I didn't say ideal, idea.
Yes. No, I hear you, and I think what we ultimately want to be doing is creating good habits around technology from early on, you know, and I think parents are key, because as Elizabeth said, if you develop a bond and a relationship with your children when they're younger, they'll come to you when they're older and they have problems. You know, sometimes I find parents wanting to create a relationship with a teenager because they now want to have access to what the teenager's thinking, but neglected to do that in the years prior. You know, and I think that's where we want to stress the importance of parents' role in their children's lives, making the time to, you know, respond. It doesn't have to be, as you say, a book or a puzzle. It can be. With my husband and my son, they watch funny videos that I don't find very funny, and they sit on the bed and laugh about that, and, you know, hysterical laughter. My son's 11, my husband's 45. They find the same things funny. Perhaps men never actually.
Don't say anything.
So, you know, it's very, very funny for me just listening to them, and then my daughter and I will go off and we'll watch something that she's interested in that same time, where we bond. And perhaps, you know, sometimes she'll tell me things very arbitrarily, but I'm hoping that when, you know, I listen to the things that are not very valuable or very important to her, that she will trust me with the things that are important. And I think that's what I want, you know, to emphasize for parents, and especially, you know, with young children, that you want to try and influence your children so you can have good habits, you can have rules around. Children love rules, they actually do. They love rules around technology. You know, you can have time set aside. I think the difficulty is that adults don't enforce those rules once they've made them, and that's where, you know, the problem comes in. If you say, I'm going to take away a device for whatever reason, if a child misbehaves or misuses it, you have to follow through, and there needs to be some kind of consequence for that. And I think that's what we want to do. And I think, you know, if I may just say, when technology is fully integrated into your life, it won't be a disruption. It will be something that will add to it. You know, you use technology, you have Wi-Fi, you have fiber, you're not going home going, hallelujah, there's Wi-Fi. That's when you know, it's working fine. Yes, it's seamless.
Can I go further than
Absolutely.
that to say that I think that we can't say that technology is the problem or the solution. Technology will simply shine a spotlight on your parenting. If you're not a good parent, your use of technology will make it worse. And if you are a good parent, you can use technology to enhance what you're trying to achieve as a parent. To blame the technology is to put the blame in the wrong place. Yeah.
In that, so here's a very practical example of how you can integrate technology. You know, initially, when we got our kids' devices, they would log on at any time to YouTube and spend time wasting their time. But essentially what we've done is we've used technology like screen time and similar things, where they're offline apart from a few important apps like Reading Eggs or Mathletics, where they're almost compelled now, if they're bored, to just go and do Mathletics or Reading Eggs. Likewise with the tracking devices, the fitness devices, we have a family group where during the course of the day you can activate somebody's device to say, hey, I've reached 10,000 steps, what have you done? Yeah. And that's how you have a more modern way of interacting with your kids while you're at work.
Yeah.
So that keeps you close as a
I would
family.
hate for my children to do that. They will be on my case all the time.
But that's exactly the point. You see that they're learning that way. So we also did some of the things just for practical examples for people watching. We wanted to teach the right type of skills around security and backups in particular. I'm passionate about backups. And so we would check my daughter's devices, and if they hadn't done a backup for a month, for example, that we'd actually take their phone away for a day or 2 days to show them this is actually a discipline issue. It's not negotiable, and the technology is not guiding the parenting. The parenting is using the technology to make parenting type decisions. We didn't always appreciate it, but my daughters do appreciate it whenever the phone gets broken or lost, and then it's 10 minutes to restore the backup, and all of their friends are crying every time it happens to them because they don't have backup. So again, as a parent, use the technology to do good parenting and encourage the type of behaviors you want in the digital world.
And maybe also then encourage the creativity to, Paul, you talk about coding, for example. So, it's interesting then that, that creative aspect that we talked about earlier is really, really important. And I've been quite fascinated about what technology can do in terms of building networks, beyond the family group and, the technologies then that you can activate as a safety, measure, for example, to sound an alarm if you're in trouble and so on. And these things we should probably encourage, particularly sort of young adults, to use the technology to create and,
Yes, and
innovate.
We have a flagship program called Jiga.com, and Jiga is taken from basically the very huge dance movement, and especially within the age group that we work with. And what we're seeing is student-run coding clubs in schools, whether it's privileged or previously disadvantaged schools. The ecosystem and the environment, the creativity that happens in those coding clubs is beyond us. I'll just give you a case in point. There's a school in Cosmos City where we went in and we coached and trained them in web development. Just the basics, HTML, and a bit of CSS there, maybe a little bit of JavaScript. And came competition time, the same school had incorporated PHP and very complex elements of coding. And it's when you dig deep and you ask, okay, so why PHP? Why did you go beyond the scope? At least, we envisage that for the first year, this is where you'll be. You're already in 5th year. And the simple answer is, we wanted to create something fun, something very cool. And unfortunately, what we had learned limited us. So we had to find out, go do a bit of research and go beyond that. So you started off as a coding club, but now it has evolved to beyond that. And that's what creativity does, because you have learners who are very, very technical, very good at the actual code. But in the club, you have learners who speak very well, who are very confident. And by speak, I don't necessarily mean English. It can be Xhosa and can be Sotho. And they articulate themselves very, very well. And it's the dynamics of the team, that creativity that makes learning fun. And our approach, we had extensive help from professionals, but our approach was, how do you introduce this coding concept in a fun manner and in a way that it will be taken up within the African context? And dance was it, and that's how Kojiga came about. Creativity. Yes.
Because there's also this idea that you can't learn if it's not fun. What you are talking about is much more than fun. It's engagement, it's motivation, it's interest. And as soon as you're interested, sparks fly. This is the neuroscience has taught us over and over. Then sparks fly. And you don't do it alone. You have relationships with those guys and girls in the club, in a Cosmos City High School. These are people who have relationships. Now they build the relationship with another theme, coding in whatever language. There you go. I like what you do, Boot.
But it also talks to something that has come to signify the fourth industrial revolution. This idea that for the first time, actually, the broader society can come to understand even, the language. Coding is a language, like any other language, and it breaks down those kind of barriers. And in particular, then, and I think this is the what's beautiful about this revolutionary renaissance, even if you want to call it that, is this idea of, creativity and breaking down boundaries between disciplines and maybe even between people.
And I think one thing that Africa is teaching the world around the fourth industrial revolution is that you don't need generations or decades of embedded education to do this. I remember a few years ago watching a video of a rural village in Kenya where they dropped off a few iPads. And these 5, 6, 7-year-old kids needed no instruction manuals. Literally, you think, surely you've got to show them at least where to switch the thing on and what it can do. No.
It's a hole in the wall.
You literally, exactly, the hole in the wall in India. You just have to give it to them. And for me, there needs to be a passion by people who are privileged in South Africa to literally just open the doors. You don't need to do more than that. They'll run through the door and take advantage. And what a privilege we have of living at this moment in history where we don't have to catch up with the whole education system. It's such a huge problem. We can literally just leapfrog into digital age.
I love that, the leapfrog, and it's one of the companies in the US is for this type of work is called leapfrog. Yes, it's exactly so. And then you talk about passion. As a female, when somebody tells me, "Oh, you're so passionate," I freeze. This is not about how I feel. This is not my passion. It is essential. We are vacuumed, in a way, into the reality. 20 years ago, we started work in Orange, which was really an informal settlement chaos, with thousands and thousands of people who just streamed in. And there we saw this type of magic in chicken runs and farm buildings of the doors opened, we learn. And it can, but we have a problem, and it's the system is too big and too heavy. Somebody said the other day, please make fewer ministers. We have 70 or something. That's exactly it. The system has become so big and so heavy that the system is pulling down the individual intelligence, the brilliance of the individual. And so you are right. Get these people together. How often is this TV? Why don't we know you?
Yes, that's a very good question.
It's interesting that you say that, Elizabeth, because some of the comments that are coming from the audience online is exactly about that. So one comment that Barry is saying here that, just like doctors used to do, this idea of community service. Maybe tech-savvy people should be, you get a degree in computer science. Maybe there's something we will post to vice chancellors in South Africa that your computer science graduates must go out and do some community service. And I know that young children in some schools, do that as well, that they share learning to disadvantaged schools and so on. But that could be maybe something to look at. I know, Mpho, is that a way forward?
Yes, definitely. So we have a volunteer. We try to open it up and not say universities only. Ideally, universities come in because you have your second year, third year level students, even first year level students who enrich the content. The age groups that we work with and university students, so the secondary learners who admire, look up to them. So there's great synergies in how we work together. And volunteering. So if you go change.co.za to see if you can't, if you're interested in volunteering, and also for society have a way for them to plug in. So we're engaging the Department of Basic. How this works is for every district that we work with within the DBE, we bring in a private partner to support the district. So there's professional development for educators, and then it goes on to the actual delivery of the content to the ground. So there are opportunities, and I'm not going to say we're the only organization that's doing it. We're only trying to find a fit within the continent that we're doing. Remember, our focus, and we're very strong about this, is to see a very strong African digital identity, which I think it is out there. We just need colleagues to make it happen.
It's interesting that you say that, Paul. I need to pick up on a couple of things. For example, Neil, who's online watching right now, he says that, there's an elephant in the room here also. There's a risk of for Industry 4.0, sort of widening income and wealth gaps as well. But I guess, and I think that, we're running out of time a bit, but I mean, I think one of the ideas that have come out from this panel tonight is also that if we teach our children technology, those risks maybe will be lessened, because we are rolling out a common knowledge base that goes across then income gaps and divides in our own society, hopefully. And I think that's the point that you make, Graham, about, and Elizabeth, well, all of you have done that in the sense of, the technology provides technology, and hope that we will be able to do so. And I think that is going to be the challenge for us, of course, as a nation, but also from a global South perspective and a global perspective as well, I guess, not to add to those wealth discrepancies, and to be able then to provide the same platforms and the same technology roll-ups for everyone. So I think it's been really, really interesting, and I've taken a lot away from this discussion, and I hope that actually we can come back to this. We'll have another panel where we can pick up on some of the things that we haven't been able to pick up on tonight, and maybe delve deeper into some areas. What I thought was really, really interesting, and I think that this sums it up, and this talks to, once again, we've talked a lot about parents and how do we protect ourselves, whether from a legal perspective or what can we do then as parents. And Barry, once again, he says that, there's no excuse, parents have to get involved, saying that just because I'm not tech savvy isn't an excuse to withdraw from your children. And I think that's the important.
If I may
Yes.
just add on that, I think parents can use this as an opportunity to learn themselves. Learning doesn't take place only at schools or at universities. Learning takes place on an everyday basis, and that's what parents need to do. They need to keep up with what their children are doing, to be interested in what their kids are doing, and that's how you can, again, build a relationship around tech, around the things your children are interested in. Lucian mentioned reading eggs. I use them in my classroom quite a lot. I use Mathletics. Parents can get involved with things like that and actually read digital books with their children, because children find that a lot more engaging than paper books. We don't have as many libraries as we used to. So children want to have access to the digital. We find they want to learn in a digital format, so we give them opportunities, but parents can get involved with that as well. There's a lot of stuff parents can do to help and assist their children.
Yeah.
We put up a nice list, for example, on futuresmartparent.com just last week, I think, of all the online courses that parents should be doing to learn. Because I think parents should be coding with their kids.
Yes, that's
and
amazing.
learning that coding.
Just a quick story. At a school in Finland, grade 4s have to do service to the community. One of them is to go to senior homes, this welfare state, wonderful stuff, to teach these old folks coding. So I asked one of these kids, and I can't speak Finnish, but it was translated. So if I were to live in Finland, what would you do? And she put her hands up like this and said, I will come to your room, translated, and when I'm finished with you, you will code.
So that actually, I think, to sum up what we've been talking about before for tonight, basically, so the age-old adage of education, we often say in this space that actually it's not so much about education anymore, it's about learning, and it's about learning. I think that's what we've all pointed out here, and hopefully we can be a testament to as well, and heed ourselves as parents, but then also in calculating our children, whether primary school children or secondary school children. I think that's it. We've had session, most people say, and they've been following us online, and comments and discussions between the audience as well, which I think is fantastic, and that's exactly what we're trying to encourage with these sessions. So thank you to the panelists, all of you have participated online. It's been a really, really interesting and fantastic session, and I think we've all enjoyed it, and we hope to see you again. And we have actually another panel coming up on the 20th of November, so I hope you will tune in then as well. Then we're going to talk about big data, which is going to be exciting. See you all then. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good. I think that